The wind pulled hard across the open plain, lifting dry snow in low whirls that clung to the fence posts like frostbitten ghosts. The barbed wire hummed and the cold stretched tight between leaning wooden spines that hadn't been mended in years. In the distance, a crow landed on the carcass of a mule deer, its black wings flapping like a signal flag against the white. The sky was pewter gray, hanging low enough to press the land flat. Clay Barrett stood in the middle of his pasture knees, stiff jaw, locked eyes fixed on nothing. His coat was too thin for the wind, his gloves stiff with age, the leather cracked along the knuckles. A week had passed since Martha's burial. No one came to the ranch anymore. The last neighbor had left him a dish and a note on the porch and never knocked. Even his cattle moved wide around him as if they knew something had broken loose inside him and it wasn't safe to get close. He should have been hauling feed. Instead, he watched the sky as if it owed him something. His breath came hard in the cold, the silence pressing so thick it rang in his ears. The barn roof sagged behind him, half caved in from the ice storm last spring. The place was failing, same as him. His boots cracked through the crusted snow as he turned toward the house, his gait slow, limping from the old break in his leg. It had never healed right. Just one more thing gone crooked with time. He climbed the porch steps and pushed open the door. The kitchen was dim. The fire had gone out again. He stared at the cold stove, and for a long while he didn't move. Then, as if driven by some half-remembered instinct, he opened the back door and let it slam behind him. The woodshed was 20 yards off. He gripped the axe handle with fingers that barely bent, chopped 4 logs, hauled them back in a woven sack across his back like a penance. He was setting the fire when he heard the knock. He stilled. No one knocked out here. He opened the door with the iron poker still in hand. She was tall, lean beneath a threadbare wool coat, and her hat was pulled low over wind-chapped cheeks. A child clung to her skirt, small and wide-eyed. Another stood half a step behind, and 3 more shapes huddled together by the gate. All 5 of them. Dirty. Quiet. Looking up like they weren't sure if they were still real. Clay stepped out, closing the door behind him. The woman didn't speak. Not right away. "We came from Calder Junction," she said at last, her voice low. "They told me there was work out here, that the man at Barrett Ranch might take us in." Clay said nothing, just looked at her. The poker still hung at his side. The wind carried her scent, old ash-wet wool, and something faintly sweet, like dried apples gone bad. "I can clean, cook, cook. So the children won't be in your way. We can earn our keep." He blinked, slow jaw working. His lips cracked as he wet them. "I didn't ask for help," he said. "No, sir," she answered. "But we need it." The small boy beside her coughed. It sounded wet, deep. The girl, no more than 10, reached for his hand and gripped it hard. Clay looked out across the field again. The barn groaned. The snow deepened. The wind picked up. Then he stepped aside. "Get in." She didn't thank him, just gathered the 2 youngest, and the rest followed like shadows. She paused before crossing the threshold, her eyes scanning the inside of the house, as if memorizing it. He noticed then the scar along her jawline, thin and white, like something a man had made in anger a long time ago. They settled in the corner, crowding near the fire once it was lit. The children didn't speak. The woman didn't offer her name. Clay didn't ask. Instead, he brought them water and a pan of beans warmed without salt. They ate with their fingers. No complaints. That night, he gave her the cot by the stove and spread a blanket in the hallway for the children. He slept in the barn next to the stall where his last horse had died 2 winters ago. He lay on the hay, staring up through the hole in the roof. Snow drifted in like dust. He did not dream. Morning came with no color, only light. The sky stayed low and pale, the sun just a suggestion behind thick cloud. Clay hauled himself up from the straw, his joints aching, shoulders locked from cold. He cracked ice from the water trough and checked the fence line before breakfast boots dragging through the drift. Snow had begun to crust the broken corners of his world. Inside the house, the woman had already swept the floor and set the kettle to boil. The children sat quietly, each with a slice of dry bread in hand. Clay stared at the scene for a beat too long, and she noticed. "I found cornmeal in the bin," she said, not quite apologizing. "Hope it was yours." He nodded once. It was. Her eyes were a light color hard to name. Not gray, not blue, something in between. The girl, the eldest maybe, was watching him too. She had her mother's stillness. Her hands were red from scrubbing. "What's your name?" he asked her mother finally. The woman hesitated, then said Ruth. He waited for a last name, but none came. "Clay," he said, although she hadn't asked. He poured water into a tin mug and drank half. "You all from Calder?" She shook her head. "We came through it." That was all. She didn't elaborate. He didn't press. They worked that day. Ruth patched a dozen shirts in silence, mending them by the stove with quick, neat stitches. The children helped her shell beans stack firewood and clean out the pantry where mice had gotten in last fall. Clay spent most of the daylight clearing snow from the barn roof and checking fence posts that had come loose in the wind. When he came back in at dusk, the house smelled of fried flour and something warm. Dinner was biscuits, thin broth, and half a carrot each. Nobody spoke until the smallest child, barely past toddler age, climbed into Ruth's lap and whispered something into her ear. She hushed him softly, brushing his curls back. Clay stood by the window. The cold bled through the glass in sheets. His eyes landed on the single photograph on the wall. Martha in a white dress, faded now, face nearly erased by sun and time. Ruth's gaze followed his butt. She said nothing. Later, after the children had curled together on the floor like puppies, Ruth stepped outside. Clay was already on the porch, whittling an old stick with a blunt blade. "Your wife?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Long gone." He hesitated. "Week ago." "I'm sorry." He didn't answer, just kept carving. The wind moved her coat like a second skin, snapping at the hem. "You got family around here?" he asked. "No," she said. "Not anymore. Dead. Some. Others might as well be." The silence sat between them. Clay looked over at her then. Her hands were bare fingers cracked from cold. Her lips chapped. Still, she didn't flinch from the wind. "What happened?" he asked, but not unkindly. She shook her head, once. A bad decision, then another. Then too many to count. They stood like that for a long while, not speaking. Just breathing the same air. Listening to the wind scuff the prairie like a broom. "You can stay a while," he said at last. "If you want." She didn't nod. Didn't smile. But something in her face loosened like a knot untying slow. "I'll earn it," she said. "I expect you will." Inside, the fire cracked. The children stirred. She turned and went back in. Clay followed a few minutes later, boots heavy on the floor. That night, he didn't sleep in the barn. He made a bed in the parlor on the settee, folding his coat under his head. As he lay there staring at the ceiling timbers, he heard Ruth's voice in the dark. "You don't know who I am," she said. He didn't answer, and she didn't repeat it. If this story felt carved from dust and grit, stay with us. Clay woke before dawn, as he always did, with the cold in his bones and the weight of another day pressing down. But the house was already warm. The fire had been tended logs stacked with care coals raked into a steady glow. He sat up slowly, joints creaking, and listened to the quiet. A kettle hissed low. Somewhere a child coughed. In the kitchen, Ruth was mixing flour with her sleeves rolled. Her hands worked quick and sure, though her knuckles were raw. One of the boys, thin as a rail, maybe 7, sat on a stool beside her watching every move. Clay didn't speak. He watched from the doorway, arms crossed over his chest. "You teach them?" he asked after a moment. Ruth glanced up. "What I can, when there's time." "What about their pat?" She didn't look at him then, just kneaded the dough with a slow rhythm that said more than any answer might have. "Gone," she said finally. "A long time now." He nodded once, eyes on the boy who was still watching his mother like she was something holy. After breakfast, Clay showed the older 2 boys how to feed the chickens and scatter hay for the mule. They didn't complain, though. The smaller one flinched when the rooster flapped too close. Clay crouched low beside him, held the boy's hands firm on the grain sack. "He won't bite you," he said. "He's just puffing up, trying to look important." The boy gave a half smile, uncertain but brave. "Name's Jesse," he whispered. "I'm 6. Clay nodded, then gestured at the older boy dragging the pail. "And him?" "Matthew. He's 9. Matthew turned, gave a quick nod, then went back to his work like he had something to prove. By midday, the wind died down. The sky cleared a little. Ruth was outside with the other children hauling water from the pump. Clay saw the sweat gathering at her hairline despite the cold. He stepped forward, took the bucket from her hand. "You'll twist your back," he said. "I've carried worse." He looked at her, studied the thin scar that ran from behind her ear to the base of her jaw. A memory itched behind his eyes, but it slipped away before he could name it. They worked through the afternoon without much talk. The barn needed shoring on the west side, and Ruth joined him with a hammer and rope. She didn't ask how, it was clear she knew the tools, knew how to brace a beam, how to lift without wasting motion. Her fingers bled by the time they finished, and she wrapped them in an old cloth without a word. That evening, as the sun burned red along the rim of the prairie, Clay brought down a tin from the top shelf. Inside were 2 slices of dried peach cake. Martha had made it before the frost came in. He handed one to Ruth. "You should have it." "I didn't come here to be fed cake," she said. "It's not about cake." She hesitated, then took it, broke it into 5 pieces, one for each child. "They come first," she said by way of explanation. He nodded. He understood that. Later, as they sat by the stove in the half-dark, Ruth looked at him and said, "You think I'm something I'm not?" He met her eyes. "I think you're standing here. That's something." She looked away, her face softening in the firelight. "I lied to get here," she said. "To whoever sent me." "You didn't lie to me." She didn't answer, just sat still, breathing steady. Clay thought of the years that had passed, the things he'd let go, the things he hadn't had the strength to hold. In that moment, he saw something in her, not just grit, not just survival. A quiet, unyielding will that matched the land itself. He didn't reach for her, didn't speak again. Just let the silence hold. Outside, the wind had stilled. The prairie breathed in sleep. Winter settled deep in its bones. Snow came in earnest, now blanketing the land in white, so thick it swallowed every trail, every fence line. The world narrowed to what was inside the house and what could be reached by foot. Clay rationed feed and chopped wood like a man doing math, with years not days. The barn stayed warm enough for the animals, and the roof held for now. Inside, life gathered slow around the fire. Ruth taught the children their letters with a charcoal nub and a scrap of sackcloth, tracing each one on the floor, letting the baby crawl between lessons. Clay fixed the loose board in the kitchen and mended what he could of the porch, though the nails bit his fingers in the cold. He took to reading a verse or 2 from the Bible before bed, not out of piety but rhythm, something to make the nights feel less empty. One morning, after a stretch of silent days, Ruth brought him a worn tin box. She held it with both hands like it might bite. "You should know," she said. He didn't open it right away, just looked at her. I used to be married to a man in Kansas. He was mean when he drank, which was often he'd lose things, hit things. Her voice stayed calm, but her hand trembled. When the youngest was still crawling, he threw him against a table. Not hard, just enough to make him scream. I picked him up, and I didn't put him back down until we'd crossed 2 counties. Clay opened the tin. Inside were folded pages brittle with age, a marriage license, a church newsletter, a wanted poster with a sketch that was close enough to her face to turn a man's stomach. He read it all, said nothing for a long time. Then he folded each paper, slowly put them back in the tin, and handed it to her. "You're not that girl anymore," he said. Ruth blinked. Once, then looked out the window. "The name I gave you, Ruth, it's not mine." Clay nodded. "I reckon you've earned the right to choose one." He left it at that. The children never knew. Or if they did, they never asked. They worked beside Clay like they had always been there. Jesse followed him like a calf, mimicking how he swung the axe, how he checked the door latches, even how he spat in the snow. Ruth took over the cooking without a word. Her meals were plain but filling. She mended the curtains. She sang sometimes quiet hymns when she thought no one was listening. And Clay, for the first time in over a year, found himself thinking of things other than endings. One day, Ruth stood outside in the cold, her eyes on the far ridge. "You ever think about starting over?" she asked. "I never stopped," Clay said. She looked down at her hands. "He might come after us. If he's still alive, I've got a rifle and no fear left in me," Clay said. "That ought to do." She looked at him then, not like a man who'd saved her, but like one who'd stayed. He stepped closer. His hands were rough-chapped, lined with cuts. He reached out slowly and brushed a strand of hair from her brow. "I don't care what name you came with," he said. "I just want to know the one you'll stay under." She looked up, her face stark in the winter light. "Anna," she said. "My name is Anna." He nodded. "Good. Now I know." That night the wind picked up again. But it sounded different now. Not like morning, like something was shifting, blowing the old out, making space for something else. Inside the fire burned steady. Anna slept near it, curled around her youngest. The others sprawled like tired pups. Clay sat in his chair watching the flames dance. He thought maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind them. The thaw came slow. Winter let go in fits and gasps, as if it wasn't ready to surrender. Snow melted to mud, and the land exhaled with a long, wet sigh. Rivers rose, roads turned to muck. Calves were born slick and shivering, and Clay wrapped them in burlap, rubbed them with straw to coax life into their spines. Anna was always there, steady, without fanfare, sleeves pushed up, hands raw. They lived quiet, but not without joy. Matthew learned to ride on the old mule, gripping the reins like they were secrets. Jesse built a slingshot and bragged until he hit a crow clean through the wing. Clay taught Anna to shoot his rifle, her hands tight on the stock, her breath steady. She hit the can on her first try. "Luck," she muttered. "Maybe," he said, smiling with a side of his mouth that hadn't moved like that in years. Still, shadows stretched long. Anna spoke little about her past, but Clay knew the weight she carried. She jumped at certain noises, slept light, kept the door latched even in the day. Once, when the mail cart passed by, she pulled the children inside like a storm was coming. "You don't have to do that," Clay said after. She just shook her head. "Not taking chances." In early spring, word came by way of a traveling feed seller. A man had been seen asking after a woman with 5 children near the Wyoming border. Name changed. Face scarred. Riding a gray horse with a chipped hoof. Clay didn't tell her at first, but it sat on him like a stone. She noticed. Of course she did. "You're quieter than usual," she said one night as she salted the stew. There's talk, he admitted. A man heading west. Could be nothing. She froze. The ladle hung in the air. Gray horse? She asked. He nodded. Her face drained. She put down the ladle hands flat on the counter. I'll go, she said. No, he replied firm. You don't know him. I don't need to. I know you. She looked at him then, something raw behind her eyes. He won't stop. Then he'll be stopped. That night, they made a plan. Moved the children into the root cellar with blankets, food, and a lantern. Clay sat out on the porch, rifle across his knees, back straight, eyes trained on the road. Anna sat beside him, not behind, not hiding. He looked at her hands. They were still, not shaking. I'm not scared of him, she said. I'm scared of what he brings back with him. You're not that woman anymore, Clay said. But I remember being her. The wind moved through the dry grass. A coyote howled far off. They waited, and when the gray horse came limping breath, steaming in the dawn, it was Clay who stood first. The man who rode it was older than she remembered, thinner, eyes sunk deep, full of rot. He carried a pistol, cheap and worn. You got something of mine, he called, voice thick with liquor. Clay stepped off the porch. I got no interest in what you think you own. The man's eyes flicked toward the house. She lied, he spat. Took what wasn't hers. Clay lifted the rifle slow and steady. Turn around. She ain't worth it. She's worth more than you'll ever be. The man smiled thin and crooked, but he saw the truth in Clay's stance, the finality in it. He turned, and he rode away. Anna stood in the doorway, pale but standing. Clay walked back, heart heavy in his chest, but lighter than it had been in years. She reached for his hand. He took it, and neither of them let go. The days that followed passed like a long-held breath being slowly let out. No more riders came, no more questions. The land woke, under the weight of spring tender shoots breaking through soil that had been frozen just weeks before. Life was returning, cautious but certain. Anna planted a garden, tight rows of beans, onions, and sweet corn behind the house. The children helped their hands in the earth, laughing when worms squirmed past their fingers. Clay built a new fence line with Matthew, who now swung a hammer, like he meant it. Jesse found an orphaned goat and named it Mercy. Anna let him keep it, even after it chewed her best apron. At night after supper, they'd sit on the porch while the sky bled purple into black. Clay smoked a pipe. Anna leaned against the post, bare arms folded. Some nights, she'd hum, and he'd listen. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. One evening after the children had gone to bed, Anna brought out the tin box again. I want to burn it, she said. Clay nodded. They walked to the fire pit, and she opened the tin one last time. She took out the papers, unfolded, each slowly held them in her lap like old bones. Then she placed them in the fire, watched them curl black and vanish. She didn't cry. Clay thought she might, but she only stood there silent, her shoulders straighter than he'd ever seen them. It's over, she said. Quiet. Final. That night, Clay couldn't sleep. He sat up in the parlor listening to the soft creaks of the house settling. After a while, Anna joined him. She wore a shawl around her shoulders, her feet bare on the floorboards. You all right? She asked. He nodded. Just thinking about... He hesitated. Whether it's too soon to ask you something. She tilted her head. You're not a man who wastes words, Clay. Say it. He looked at her hands loose in his lap. This land's near broken, but it's mine. I got nothing much to give, just a name and a place. But if you'd take it, I'd want you here for good. Anna didn't answer right away. She looked around the room, the patched walls, the stove still warm, the corner where her youngest slept, wrapped in quilts. Then she looked back at him. "I've never been asked," she said. "I'm asking now." She stepped toward him. Her fingers brushed his cheek, rough as his own. "Then yes." They were married under the cottonwood tree by the creek. Just the children, a traveling preacher, and the smell of wet grass in the air. Ruth, now Anna again for good, wore a simple dress she'd sewn herself. Clay stood stiff in his only coat, hands shaking as he held hers. The children picked wildflowers for the table. Mercy, the goat, chewed the hem of the preacher's robe. Afterward, Anna kissed Clay's cheek in front of the children, and he flushed like a schoolboy. The seasons turned. The ranch held. Anna taught Clay's hands to hold softer things. Clay gave her back her name and never once asked for anything she wasn't ready to give. They built a new room onto the house. Anna kept a small locket on the windowsill, a tiny curl of her youngest's hair, sealed inside a mark of where they'd been. In late summer, as the sun set red over the field, Anna leaned back against Clay and pressed his hand to her belly. "You'll have to build another cradle," she said. Clay's eyes filled before he could stop them. He kissed her hair, the back of her neck, and held her close. From the porch, the children watched, still and smiling. The land had changed. The wind still came, but now it carried seed, not sorrow. Inside, the fire crackled. Outside, the garden grew. And for the first time, the Barrett Ranch felt full. The West remembers those who don't turn back. Subscribe and stay.